I f***ed up. A lot of the script was copied from Overlord Gaming. This was a bad mistake, and all credit is due to Overlord Gaming. This will never happen again. No need to apologize, dude. The other YouTuber talks about piracy, yet he thinks he owns the stupid video he uploads. He's a hypocrite. So you know how I mentioned that H-Bomber Guy video about plagiarism in my last video? Dude. Jesus Christ. Before we go on, I want to go ahead and thank this video's sponsor, Rocket Money. One of the harder things about making my videos is that it often involves doing my own research, which, when your job involves analysing popular media, often involves dealing with the fact that there's seemingly a new streaming service popping up every month or so that you're apparently supposed to have been subscribed to. Rocket Money is an app designed to help you manage your finances and save more of your money, making it easier to budget and even helping negotiate your bills with just a few taps of a button. You can set up smart savings with easy and straightforward withdrawal. And if you're like me and thinking about finances at all gives you an anxiety attack, it definitely makes the whole process much easier to deal with. And with the new year, you can get a free trial to try out the service by using the link in the description or going to rocketmoney.com/lackingsaint. Rocket Money already has like 5 million members, and you can join them by just using that link down in the description. Thank you. I have two things to talk about in this video. First thing, turns out modern Wonka works. It takes a big man to admit when he's wrong, but I think it takes an even bigger man to continue to argue with his critics, even when he has the same opinions as them on the thing they're arguing about. I still think my first Wonka video is basically correct. I just also think it's a, good, fun film that you should all watch. And really, in this kind of situation, I think that's like the best case scenario when we're talking about take the L. I had a Wonka video come out a few months ago based on the mixed reactions people were having to promotions of the 2023 prequel remake, which, based on what people were upset about, I thought was a good jumping off point to talk about a lot of things relating to that original story and the context around it. My general take was that there's nothing necessarily to say a reboot reimagining of the original Roald Dahl story couldn't work, but I think of the commentary that was in there from the beginning, it seemed like the new movie was pulling out the most shallow and vapid kind of version of that. A trend that had been repeating with a lot of modern movies trying to do similar things, and it was being reflected in people's hate for it. To be more blunt, I understood that people tend to rush to video shitting on modern media that they feel trashes their nostalgic childhood franchises, and I was deliberately using clickbait as a way to try to engage in that conversation in a way I thought would be more nuanced and productive. More about what that original story was and what I felt you could do with it, rather than just being a review of a piece of media that at the time hadn't actually been released. Foreshadowing for later. It turns out clickbait works, and I got a lot of responses to the video. Some fair, some thinking I was criticizing white people, and some that did in fact think that the entire 30-minute video was an analysis of a film I hadn't seen. In fact, for the past week, about 80% of my comments have been some variation of "this didn't age well," which I have found interesting for several reasons after watching the film. Let me just pause here, though, because I understand that there is a bigger thing hanging over this video, and maybe you're just not somebody who particularly cares about the whole Wonka side of this. Thing is, it is going to be pretty relevant, and it's a good segue to talk about something people have been asking me about for quite a while now, but I completely understand if you just want to skip straight to the drama, so, feel free to stop here and look at the timestamps and go from there, you drama gremlins, you. But pushing that aside for a second, was I right about Wonka? One of the funner, unexpected things about the new Wonka movie is that even though it does basically stick to the very squeaky clean, idealized version of the Wonka character I alluded to in that first video, it doesn't actually shy away from exploring other darker ideas that aren't out of place for a story like this. It does make me confused by comments saying things like, why can't we just enjoy some whimsical escapist fantasy? Why do you want everything to be some serious social commentary? Because the film is very clearly making social commentary, and a lot of it is darker than even what I was suggesting. Wonka spends pretty much the entire film in abject poverty, save from freezing to death only by two manipulative bosses who end up exploiting Willy's inability to read to contract him into indentured servitude. All of this is in the backdrop of a borderline authoritarian regime where a corporate mafia owns the police and uses them to further suppress the impoverished and murder their competition.
Why can't you just enjoy some escapist fantasy, YouTube man?
If there was one thing I wanted to stress about the original story, it's how integral the darker satirical elements are to it, and express my concern about a version of the character that seemed to lack that sense of satire or darkness, replaced instead by a very typical humble genius entrepreneur who goes from rags to riches with his sheer amazing invention and creativity. A version that matched a very idealized liberal fantasy that if a good person just works hard, they can bootstrap their way to immense fame and fortune. It's the kind of old-fashioned industrial story people have been trying to comment on since that book everyone said you had to read, or that movie everyone said you had to watch, pointing out how often inspiring narratives like this require a lot of shadier behaviors and destructive obsessions in the context of how the world actually works. It was always my feeling that Willy Wonka was basically the kids' bop version of that. Wonka is a fairly callous and detached businessman who's more than happy to sink thousands of workers into poverty in the name of a competitive edge, engage in some baby's first colonialism, put out flashy promotions that actually put people in very real danger, and all of this is wrapped up neatly into the Gene Wilder version of the character. There are clearly parts of that character that hit different to a modern audience, and that's why I spent almost the entire video talking about. That's the part of modern Wonka that didn't work. My biggest assumption, based on promotional material, was that the Timothée Chalamet Wonka was being stripped of this edge. And he was. It's basically the running joke of his character that he is so completely naive and ignorant of the exploitative reality of the business world that he's constantly getting himself into terrible situations. There's even multiple times where the tricks he falls for are the exact same things he himself used to manipulate people in other media.
The small print.
Thank you, Noodle, that'll do.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal.
You really couldn't make it more transparent that this film was an effort to remove the darker commentary of Willy Wonka and transplant it elsewhere so that it could be easier to maintain the whitewashed rags to riches story. And no, the main meaning of whitewashing still doesn't have anything to do with hating white people. You have poison in your brain. I like how everything he says in 826 is exactly what didn't happen, lol. But it did, though. The new movie does take a character and his story and strip it of the more dark and morally questionable commentary that was originally there. They did make the Oompa Loompas fancy British men, who if anything seem more financially stable than Wonka and have explicit contractual partnerships with him. They did take every negative trait of Wonka and transplant it to some mustache-twirling villains. And it turns out I was even unexpectedly right about them adding a part of the story where someone is the secret heir to a chocolate empire, so that even that doesn't need to have any shades of grey around it. It was just also a movie that was brave enough to come up with its own story that had its own commentary, even if that was to sidestep a lot of the things that made the original Wonka character interesting. And it was able to do it in a fun way, proving both that you don't need to dislike whimsical fantasy to appreciate stronger themes, and that the guy who directed Paddington knows how to make a good film, which I also already said. Whether modern Wonka worked in the video never had anything to do with whether you could make enjoyable family entertainment out of it. Wonka yes. Good. So no, I don't think that my video aged like milk or anything. I genuinely think, again, that we got kind of the best case scenario. A good, fun film that has its own things to say. And also, I happen to be pretty much correct about the predictions I made about it. When I made that first follow-up video, I got a lot of comments that were like, how ironic that people would think you're rushing to shit on something you hadn't seen, and then react by rushing to shit on a video they hadn't watched. But I think that's kind of smug in a way that's not really necessary. I know it's natural for people to rush to validate their snap judgments about things. It's kind of the thing I was banking on to get people to pay attention to what I had to say. And in the case of disagreeing with a video you see as critical of something you like, it's a very creative way to make being a hater out of being a lover. We all love to hate. I don't blame anyone for having the immediate reactions they had. YouTube does definitely have a tendency to reward negatively charged clickbait. And as an olive branch, I am actually going to be changing the title of the original video to something I think is less inflammatory and more indicative of the actual content, more using the controversy around this film as a jumping off point to talk generally about Wonka. A jumping off point to talk more generally about the themes of this original story, which has always kind of been more the thrust of my channel. Thrust wasn't even in the original script, but I guess I'm just going to use that word now. One of the problems with YouTube is if you want to try to sort of steer the conversation anywhere, it does put you in a kind of tough position. You can either be upfront about your less inflammatory, more nuanced opinions, and then immediately decimate your audience and encourage them more towards videos that do tend to be more kind of simplistic, thing bad, and often within that have a lot more bad opinions packaged within that, foreshadowing for later. Or you can dive straight into the trash. And I am trash. I guess what I'm building up to is a point about how YouTube, much like the land of the chocolate mafia, is an example of a system that encourages and rewards bad practices, and often forces you to engage with those bad practices if you want to actually have your work seen, which is kind of the point. Me trashing my views by changing a title doesn't actually do anything about YouTube rewarding clickbait, and I can't really do anything about the constant avalanche of repetitive, lazy, rushed, pandering videos that I was intentionally trying to subvert. YouTube rewards that kind of content, and more often than not, it can reward some shadier practices than that. Speaking of which, Moon is not a YouTuber I have ever been aware of, but apparently he has over 1 million subscribers after only like 3 years making videos, and it's no surprise he puts out a new highly produced video essay like every other day and on such a wild variety of trending topics. I wonder how he's able to keep up that kind of output. To skip the preamble, yes, I did see the video he made with a suspiciously similar title and thumbnail to my own. Yes, I did see the opening section and various sections of the video that were suspiciously similar to my own. It seems like Timothée Chalamet has gone full whimsy. There's a real whimsy overload to the vibe of the whole thing.
It seems like the eccentricity and the whimsical parts of his character are all there really is. And if the world is already whimsical from the beginning, then there's no sense that you're actually stepping into a whole new world. There's 1,000 little details you could point out to illustrate how great this performance is from the boat scene alone.
There is probably no performance I've ever seen that matches his speech while they're going down on the boat.
You truly get the sense that he cares about the experience and childhood wonder deeply, but at the same time, he seems completely callous and indifferent to the things that happen to other kids. But it all comes together in a complex, self-contradictory, brilliant package.
That to me is Wonka. Detached, callous, but also filled with childlike wonder, a man of constant contradiction.
People rightfully made jokes about Grandpa Joe from the original.
Grandpa Joe. Yes, I do have thoughts. So the video itself is not good.
You just see the same actors over and over again. The same actors over and over again. They're always the safest option. Timothée Chalamet.
Shoe Tucker.
I mean, the people behind it only had $2 million to work with.
And funnily enough, despite having a lot of little similarities to my own video, runs exactly into the kind of thing that I was trying to avoid. Being an actual review of a piece of media Moon has clearly not seen, despite the fact that by the time he made his video, the film was in fact actually out.
You can tell even before watching the movie that there won't be a real message, why he just doesn't come across in the right way in the movie. And in the scene where Wonka gives hover chocolates to some of the chocolate cartel in front of an onlooking crowd, they eat them, tell him it's rubbish, and then they start flying. One of them shouts, "Who in their right mind wants a chocolate that makes you fly?"
Who in their right mind wants a chocolate that makes you fly?
Guess the heart of why this movie just doesn't really work.
Clearly an excuse to go on a rant about how modern movies are bad now and we need more original films like Barbie?
People are just getting sick and tired of it. You don't need more evidence than the biggest cinema event of the year, Barbenheimer. Both films were pretty much completely original, besides the fact that Barbie was obviously already a toy brand.
Also something to do with China. Apparently Moon talks about China a lot. I do think substantively there is a difference between using concerns about a film months before it's released to talk about a wider subject, and releasing a video after that film has been released that is still built around the same concerns. I mean, you could just watch the movie at that point and then comment on it. It would just mean you have to rely more on your own original thoughts and actually take the effort to think about the thing. Instead, Moon talks about basically nothing in the film you couldn't glean from the trailers, and at one point even ties it in with something about people being sick of wokeness, and it's very strange because Wonka is not woke at all. Like I say, it's mostly a very traditional rags to riches type narrative. There are, black people in it. One of them is the villain of the film. It's either that or a comment about the industry's lack of originality, which, oh boy, that's a fun spin on it.
It's pretty unlikely that it will acknowledge the irony of one of the big studios making a movie about originality destroying an economic monopoly. It's like Warner Bros. Saw Slugworth and decided to follow his example instead.
It's all kind of bizarre anyway, because now that the film is out, it's plainly apparent that it is not a failure, either with audiences or commercially.
It's the reason why so many of these films come out, despite the fact that barely anybody wants to see them anymore.
It's almost like Moon is going back to things people were worried about months ago and just transplanting it here because it hadn't really been long enough to gather up the criticisms other people had made of the finished product. I'm saying almost here because, while I did have that same clickbaity impulse to title this video something like, "So I was plagiarized," while doing the DreamWorks face, I'm fighting all business sense here to say, in this case, despite people's concerns, I really don't think there is enough here to accuse Moon of plagiarizing me. He didn't even film it in an attic with the Mexico filter. At the end of the day, a lot of my video is fairly politically charged in quite the opposite direction to Moon for reasons I'll bring up later, and even if Moon happened upon my video while looking for other popular essays about Wonka, I'm pretty sure he would have been scared off around the 10-minute mark, and that's when the video spirals into what I just talked about. Or actually, I should say, most likely one of his employees would have been scared off because Moon probably didn't write this video, or edit it, or make the title or thumbnail. See, I don't think I would have included this segment at all if this was just about Moon's Wonka video, because in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty negligible. Even if I could prove anything, it's appropriately only the most generic observations I make that we're talking about here. The language may have been more distinct, but other people have made similar points about the Gene Wilder Wonka before, or Timothée Chalamet's simplified version of the character. What would be interesting is if the video not only made specific points about Wonka that tied into my own in a relevant way, but if it did so in a funny and ironic way that would only become apparent when I googled the words Moon YouTube plagiarism. It turns out Moon has a habit of 3 particular things that are common for these kinds of content mill channels: lack of credit, weak argumentation, and actual bullshit.
And yet the weirdest part of all of this is that these Reddit mods all share that same look. Well, in this video you'll soon understand that the reason for their distinct look is the reason for their power. And it's their power that is subtly changing the society we live in. Trust me when I say that this entire thing is a rabbit hole. And after doing some more research, the answer really wasn't that surprising, because I believe this behavior is likely a result of their low testosterone.
The general format is to take a trending topic and 1. Have someone write a video with often borrowed elements from other people's work. I showed a quote at the start of this video from a controversy involving Moon's video on Reddit, which takes huge chunks of another video on the same topic made by Overlord Gaming.
They occasionally take the trouble to falsely accuse the ban community of breaking some rules in a pointless and pathetic attempt to justify the ban.
The admins of Reddit will falsely ban subreddits under the guise of breaking some arbitrary rules in a pointless and pathetic attempt to justify the ban.
They weren't always this trigger happy.
There
was once upon a time when they would only close a community if it brought unwanted media scrutiny and bad PR to the whole website.
There was actually a time when they would only close a community if it brought unwanted media scrutiny and bad PR to the whole website.
And you might say it's to Moon's credit that he did openly admit to the plagiarism and put out an apology to this other creator, even though he did like comments making fun of them and calling them hypocrites for being mad at him. And I would say that I would agree. if Moon didn't then delete the apology and then just start blocking any comment that referenced the plagiarism. Since then, Moon has gotten more into a habit of crediting people he steals from, even if it does make it much easier to source when he does it, as can be seen from his Breaking Bad videos, which for some reason, despite frequently repeating observations made by David Pearson, does not actually credit his work anywhere in the description. Instead, there's a link to a video by The Take, which seems strange because at no point does Moon refer to the
Professor David Pearson examines the connection between Gus's business tactics and neoliberalism.
Professor David Pearson examined this connection between Gus Fring and neoliberalism.
Furthermore, Pearson points out that methamphetamine is just one drug among a class of performance enhancers that have, quote, become both the fuel and the product for the neoliberal fetish for productivity.
Furthermore, Pearson points out that meth is just another drug that fuels the neoliberal fetish for productivity.
Most products in this class are legal, like caffeine, energy drinks, steroids, Viagra, and prescribed Adderall, which, by the way, is very close to meth chemically.
Because most performance enhancers are legal. Caffeine, energy drinks, steroids, Viagra, and prescribed Adderall, which is pretty much meth in itself.
A mindset that we can trace to many of our crises in recent decades. The dot-com bubble, the financial crashes of 2008, and when it comes to drugs, today's opioid epidemic.
It's the same dog-eat-dog attitude that has saturated our economy, manifesting the dot-com bubble, the 2008 financial crash, the opioid epidemic, which is why the ruthlessness and predatory actions we associate with crime isn't actually associated with drugs, but more with the business behind it.
On the surface, Gus is a benevolent philanthropist and a model citizen.
On the surface, Gus is just a benevolent philanthropist. He's a model citizen.
But his smile doesn't reach his eyes.
We see the fake smiles that don't reach his eyes.
Or his video on YouTube, which was inspired by this video by Just Me Habib. Oh. Okay. These links are also kind of obvious because in any other situation, Moon does not source anything that he says. Soy, tap water, alcohol, dairy, plastics, these things are causing your sperm to develop two heads, double tails, crooked bodies, and misshapen sizes. 150 years ago, Nietzsche predicted AI would destroy humanity. Now even Google admits that AI has a 10% chance of wiping out humanity. This leads into 2, the desperate construction of a shocking clickbait narrative.
We're seeing more and more people rejecting the values of our twisted habitus. With all the bullshit fed to you by Big Brother, the pendulum towards individualism is swinging back. It just shows to me that the New World Order is on the horizon.
Like I say, Moon likes to talk a lot about China, or political correctness, or the World Economic Forum, or China.
China always seems to be positioned perfectly in every major event. The January 6th protests, the Ukraine war, the political division spreading across the world, inflation, the rise of TikTok. It's becoming very, very clear how much leverage China has over everyone. And it turned out that this was just the tip of the iceberg.
This guy is quite literally claiming that when you delete your Discord account, your account isn't actually deleted and it continues to send information back to the CCP. He shows no proof of this, no evidence, provides zero sources, but again, we're supposed to believe him over Discord, right? Fuck it, dude, let's just dive into this landfill.
Run my mouth, I don't care if it gets toxic.
I agree with this 14-year-old. Moon pretends this has something to do with him having dangerous covert knowledge that makes it so important to support his channel.
If me or any other independent YouTuber were to speak about controversial news events, my channel would likely be striked, posing a serious risk for my channel being completely deleted.
But it's pretty clear it's usually more that backing up what he says is a lot less important than rushing to a giant conspiracy narrative. There's nothing to say you can't make bold claims about big political issues, but it starts to feel strange when you literally never direct your viewers to anywhere that could back up what you're claiming. Credits don't just exist for when you get caught stealing shit. I think this is less of an issue with more general statements that are just backing up your own opinions, and in general, a lot of YouTubers don't provide a lot of sources. I was 100% guilty of this in my first few years of making video essays, so I'm definitely more forgiving on that, but at least I never made a claim like YouTube has monetized videos of rappers having with children.
Videos of rappers children, or Lil Nas twerking on Satan. All of these videos are monetized and actively promoted across YouTube. Not to mention all the other
or China made TikTok to brainwash teenagers.
They are brainwashing the youngest among us, and they are doing this on the orders of the Chinese government.
There's even these minor occasions where it'll say things that sound like quotes like,
well, investors would often dismiss YouTube as cute and not a proper business,
which I can find no source on except for another article quoting his video. Other than that, it's really just the most baffling line of logic logic you've ever seen in a channel.
If anything, the movie makes less of a statement than the FBI did when they arrested one of the actors straight after the premiere. Not based on the film, according to them at least.
Like a recent one where he promotes the Daily Wire as a contrast to Hollywood's lack of originality by talking about their version of Snow White?
When you look back at the history of cinema and the thousands of amazing movies, it leaves you envious of what Hollywood used to be. And this is the gap in the market that the Daily Wire has decided to exploit.
Which he then compares to unoriginal movies like, I guess, Inside Out and The Menu and the other version of Snow White.
If upcoming movies like the Snow White remake tell us anything, is that Hollywood studios are doomed for failure. The film will be called Snow White and the Evil Queen, focus more on the old brothers Grimm fairy tale and the traditional story rather than anything out of the ordinary. They haven't released many details so far, but from what they said, it seems like they're going in the right direction.
As I said at the start, I had no knowledge of Moon before people started sending me links to his Wonka video, and the stuff I've said here was only gleaned from a few days looking over his channel. I'm sure people could find more of this if they look for it, and there are other videos on this subject.
I wonder how this person is able to reconcile the idea that Justin TV was meant for people to have a free space with no censorship, and now this person, Hassan, is being used as an example of Twitch being bad, and the implication is because they didn't censor him.
If you try to criticize Steph, the media immediately regards this as a hate and harassment campaign.
This was not true at all. Pay Money Wubby and I both made videos that were critical of this, and nothing happened to either one of us.
The way that Twitch is hiding sexual assault and harassment allegations against much of Twitch's biggest partners, all in the name of protecting profits. The worst offense.
That is crazy. Bro, that is like completely fucking out of pocket. If you want to talk about misinformation, I think we're looking at it right here.
And they are doing this on the orders of the Chinese government.
This isn't intended as a Moon takedown video, and I doubt it would ever impact his channel. He has literally published another 9 videos since I started on this one. In part, I just wanted to respond to what people were saying to me about it, and in part because I think what I found interesting was the contrast between the points Moon makes in his videos, including his Wonka video, and what his channel actually is. Moon complains about a lack of originality while regurgitating unsourced scare points and arguments made by other people which he has paid other writers to come up with. Writers who are also never credited for any of what they do for him, making it impossible to figure out which of his endless flow of videos are actually his own work. This is exactly the kind of channel I was thinking about when I made my video, and I guess it kind of pains me to see that there has now been this feedback loop created, because YouTube recognized it as being similar to those videos in a surface level way and rewarded that. I mentioned plagiarism in my last video, but that was also part of a broader point about how these problems are not just the result of bad individuals, but systems incentivizing certain behaviors. In the case of Hollywood, that has been nominally differentiated reproductions of nostalgic media with shallow allusions to a modern audience. In the case of YouTube, that's unoriginal, repetitive, negatively charged clickbait content produced in an endless drip feed. And it's just weird, you know, like the whole video essay content mill industrial complex of channels like Nerdstalgic and Moon was really only sort of starting up when I first started making videos. And it's weird to see those channels now get wrapped up into this big talking point about how modern media is unoriginal and is kind of just rushed out for the sake of profit. In a funny way, the point Moon was trying to make about Wonka, about Hollywood's lack of originality, is actually perfectly represented by channels like his. Regardless of any bad individuals, as long as a system rewards bad practices, as long as an industry rewards safe, lazy, rushed out content, that is what's going to be chased. If you're someone that saw my last video and you liked Wonka and felt that I was being kind of unfair, I hope that the first part of this video helps kind of clear out my intentions with the original thing. If you saw it because you too are feeling quite cynical about the state of modern Hollywood, I hope that in general this has given you some sort of food for thought in terms of YouTube and the way it's currently designed to kind of trap you in this specific mindset. Either way, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, feel free to like or share it or leave a comment down below. Maybe I can make a fourth video on this subject. I also have tip links down below, and if you do tip, maybe you'll be on the credits that's scrolling by now. Actually, maybe on that side, probably. And if Moon is unhappy with how he's been characterized in the video, I would like to extend my offer for a duel, which sadly, as the year comes to a close, Shadowversity has not taken me up on it. Thank you for watching. Foreshadowing for later. Remember to use the link in the description. Thank you.
Timothy Chalamet